Hello, all you beautiful people. My name is Peter Levitov. This is Handpan 360. And today we're going to talk about all the different parts of the instrument and what they're called in handpan land. There's a lot of nooks and crannies to explore. Each section is a universe inside of itself. So without further ado, let's start at the very beginning in the center. This is the center tone. Back in pan art days, it was called the ding, which some people still refer to it as the ding. In the center tone, you'll generally have two options, a dome that comes out and a dome that goes in, also referred to as a dimple. We call the one that moves out an apex and the one that goes in an inpex, also fondly referred to as innie and outies. Around the dome, you have the tone field, which is this flat area here. And circling around the tone field, you have the note border. The note border on the center tone is a much more prominent space than tone field borders because you do have these percussive tones that are commonly referred to as shoulder tones. And you can hear it's not quite like a strike in the tone field, and it's not quite like a strike in the interstitial. It has a sound all its own. The note border then transitions into the interstitial, which is all the space around notes. In the interstitial is where you will see some percussive strikes. You'll sometimes see some of these kinds of strikes. As we look at the interstitial, you can see that in between two notes, there's an hourglass or a tree. And so when I'm doing a percussive strike, I'm often aiming for the center of that triangle where it's strongest. These are not to be done on any tone field because the tone fields are quite sensitive. The interstitial is stronger, so it can take these kinds of strikes, but you have to be very accurate and make sure you're going very slow when you're learning these techniques so you don't knock your note out, which is quite possible to do with your hands. Also on the higher notes, you get a little extra interstitial as they're smaller than the low notes. Then we have these notes here. They're referred to as tone fields and sometimes the note circle. The same thing occurs here where we have a inpex here. This is referred to commonly as a dimple, and then the dimple border, tone field, and the note border. And then back to the interstitial. Each note has three notes, more or less, inside of it, three prominent notes. You have the fundamental, you have the octave, and you have the fifth. These are all ringing out whenever you strike anywhere on the note, more or less. But you can also isolate them as the octave tends to live on this long axis. If you see the egg and you go right in half. And the fifth lives on the short axis. So if you hold in one space and strike 90 degrees, you get the harmonic. Right? All right, moving on to the bottom, we have the port. In pan art days, we referred to this as the goo. Oftentimes these days it's referred to as the port. And there's a ring around the port, which sometimes has 1, 2, or 3 harmonics that are really audible tuned into it and sometimes may not be tuned at all. And then here, this I would refer to as the neck going into the port here. And depending upon the shape of this neck, you're gonna get more or less of that bass sound. Now that bass sound is commonly referred to as the Helmholtz. And that is mostly determined by a combination of the size of this hole, the shape of the neck, and the volume inside of the chamber. All right, that about wraps it up. If you have any questions, please let me know. If you like this content, I go crazy in depth into all things handpan at handpan360.com. I'll be releasing a course soon, so head over there and get on the mailing list. All right, onward and upward. Last shot, guys, last shot. Okay, great. Just talking to myself in a room alone.